following is a presentation of the Belly Up Sports Media Network.
Baseball season is right around the corner. The 1420 Sports Bar Podcast and SeatGeek are on a 30-day tour with fans from around the major leagues. Listen in as we talk about where to get a bite or a beverage pre- and post-game, best place to sit at every ballpark, favorite food, favorite players, and favorite moments from all 30 stadiums from around the big leagues. It's the 1420 Fan Experience Ballpark Tour brought to you by SeatGeek. Let's get into it. The 1420 Major League Baseball Fan Experience Tour brought to you by SeatGeek.com. The SeatGeek app. Use promo code 1420POD at SeatGeek.com today and save yourself $20 on your first purchase. Stop number 10 on the Fan Experience Tour takes us back to the American League East and the Rogers Center, home of the Toronto Blue Jays. Joining us today is Scott Belford of the Walk-Off Podcast, your go-to spot for all things Toronto Blue Jays. Scott, how are you doing today, my friend?
Brent, I am doing excellent, man. It is baseball season again, and so I'm in my wheelhouse.
Yeah, the wife that you mentioned, that the wife, she's what's that Jimmy Fallon movie where he's there's summer Jimmy and there's a summer Brent and a winter Brent.
Like that.
I'm in summer Brent mode, so she knows she won't see me again until about the end of October, early November when I hunker down here. It's kind of one of those things. Us baseball dorks kind of we run by our own way. It's a lot different than hockey guys and football guys, baseball guys, because there's games nonstop, and I'll watch whatever's on TV no matter what.
Oh, I'm guilty too.
Before we get going on the tour today, Scott, I want to ask you a question. The last time the Blue Jays played any kind of game of substance, what the heck happened, man? It was 8-1. We were enjoying a Saturday afternoon of baseball. I think it was a Saturday, and then all of a sudden the wheels fell off the Jays. What happened on that fateful day against the Seattle Mariners?
Boy, you're just going to start right off with triggering me, eh?
But the Yankees didn't have a very good run either, but yeah.
I've been doing a lot of self work, trying to push that out of my head and give myself less anxiety. It was rough, man. It was a complete collapse. I haven't seen anything like that as a Blue Jays fan, even a baseball fan. It's rare to see an 8-1 collapse like that when the game matters. And I think that you can make all sorts of excuses as to the core was young and they had. I don't know what to tell you, honestly, and I don't think they do either. The best thing that this team can do is turn the page, man. Look forward. You don't gain and garner the kind of experience that losing like that gets without going through it. I think that there is some positives to this. There frickin' better be, my man.
Yeah, because if you dwell on that, when they brought that, I think we'll get that a little later on. They did bring in some guys that could say maybe that with some World Series pedigree that will help them through that a little bit and say, hey, you got to forget this because sometimes you got to learn how to lose before you can learn how to win. That goes way back to the early '80s with the Oilers and the New York Islanders and the like of that stuff going on there. But yeah, I mean, it was a wild afternoon of baseball. And you go, how the heck's going on? And you just kind of seen it happening. And then that bloop single, I think it was in the 8th. Where Springer got his head almost decapitated by Bichette's knee.
Yeah.
And you just felt like this when that ball was starting to bloop over. I said that's going to drop. That's going to drop, and sure as shit it did. And then that was it. Yeah, it was crazy, absolute craziness.
The fact that it's really hard to pinpoint one reason as to why it collapsed, like it was a series. It was a laundry list with a wide range of characters that could take the blame on this, like as easy as it is to say that Bichette Springer thing. I mean, there's Raimel Tapia who missed the ball in left. There's Tim Meza there's John Schneider who brought in Tim Meza when he probably
I would never have made that pitching change. Because Gausman, he got himself out of that a little bit and he was doing okay and he got the 2 outs after the first guy and on and on and on. And it just you don't want to pin, like you said, you don't want to pin it on one guy, but you look back and like hindsight's 2020. I would have left Gausman in. That's just me.
And you're right. Hindsight's 2020. I mean, in today's baseball, though, you give that scenario with no names, no teams, and just going by what normally happens. Yeah, you pull your starting pitcher there. It's not that difficult. But when you watch a collapse like that, of course, that's the first thing you're going to say is, why are you taking your starter out?
Well,
Like,
we'll get into. I want to tell you, it's funny how how baseball's turned in the last 10 years or so, or maybe even more. But how guys are just outs eaters now, not innings eaters, but outs eaters. And you don't work to just get to your closer. It's out eaters, and you get out eaters. It's a way different game than it was just 10 years ago. These guys just throw so damn hard that you can't expect them to keep going. But we'll get off of that whole situation. You don't want to rehash the old memories because I deep down inside, of course, I'm from Canada as well, so I'm a Jays guy a little bit, not a lot of it, but when baseball's a lot more interesting when there's more Jays fans involved in it, and it kind of ended things for me. I don't know how many times a year you get to Toronto to watch a game, but the lots I've been there a number of times. What's not one place that shut down just recently that was my go-to spot before a game was Gretzky's for a beer or a bite, and that's just down the road from I'll
yeah,
always call it
on
Fido,
Blue
no
Jay
matter
Way
what.
there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
you
right there.
bet.
It was always a good place to go. I almost got in a fight with a Jays fan there one night, whatever. That's another story. But he was going to punch me. I had nothing to do with it. Just because I was wearing a Yankee hat, this guy wanted to beat me up, and I was like, well, whatever. But anyways, what's your go-to spot when you go to Toronto for some pregame meals or a beer or a bite or what you got going on?
I always like to head down to the game early. There's a couple hot dog vendors around the Rogers Center that I like to
Yep.
hit before I even head in, you know, and depending on where my budget is. So I lived in Toronto when I was getting to I moved to Toronto to do stand-up comedy and moved once I had the capability of making a living without needing to be in the city. But I loved my time in Toronto, and I was there from about 2011 to 2017. So I was there in some lean years where you could literally go down to the ballpark, and the most expensive part was buying food, you know, like getting the
Yeah.
ticket was $5 from a scalper and you're sitting in the 500s. And there is something to be said for sitting in the cheap seats with all the other you know, what's the best way of putting it? Riffraff.
That's
Hey,
one way
that's
of
right.
putting it. Yeah.
That's the right term, right? The riffraff. I like sitting with the riffraff. But my favorite place that I've sat in the Rogers Center, right field is fantastic. It's you just feel so in the game, and there's so I mean they're trying to fix that right now with these renovations, but there really are so few areas in the Rogers Center where you truly feel a part of the game, you know, because it does feel a little bit like you're in a bomb shelter or a cement bunker of some kind. But I love right field. I love being right there in the outfield. Left field's cool too. But yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
it is
you
what it is
talk
at Rogers.
like you talk about Rogers Center. Like the first time I went there, I went by myself, and it's like, geez, this is awfully cavernous, and it's not really didn't have a ballpark feel. We'll get into renovations in a second here, but it didn't feel like a ballpark like other places do. And the thing about Rogers Center, Skydome, whatever you want to call it, is that when it opened in '89, I think it was supposed to be this revolutionary thing, and everybody was going to do it, and it was going to happen again. And turns out nobody else did it. Nobody else even
Hmm.
thought about doing it. And then in '94, I think it was when Camden Yards opened up, that became the new wave of ballparks, the retro fashion ballparks and everything else. And then
Open.
the
Yes.
open ballparks and the looking back in the history of the game, and Rogers Center was a thing of the past 5 years in, and it served its purpose. What's your thoughts on that?
I would agree. I mean, Toronto needs a roof. So I get why that's the standard there, but I do like the fact that they're doing some renos that make the fan experience a little bit better. I've been to about a dozen parks across MLB, and some of my favorites are stuff Toronto couldn't do, right? Like Oracle in San Fran is absolutely
Unbelievable.
beautiful on the bay. It is one of the best premium stadiums in all of baseball. And if you're a ball fan and haven't got a chance to go to San Fran, I'd put it on your list because it is
100.
absolutely awesome. But Toronto can't do that, right? Like we'd lose all of it. You need a roof on it at some point. So if they can find one thing that I really liked about Safeco, I guess it's what is it, T-Mobile in Seattle now is the
It's
new
always
name
going to be
for it.
safe, going to be no matter what, right? It's one of
Yeah,
those things.
yeah. So with Safeco, yeah, it's got a roof, but when it's closed, it's got the open air along the sides, and it just
Yeah.
feels so much less cavernous because of that, right? Like you just it
100%.
feels more intimate for whatever reason.
I love going to games there. That's a great spot to go to. It's not very far from where we are
Mm-hmm.
here in Alberta, right? So you can get down to a game or game or two a year, whatever it may be, when the Jays are around there, or the Yankees go down. Yeah, that's a great place. Like, and then they were talking about the Jays maybe getting a new ballpark, and I've been there a number of times, and I just got thinking, where?
Yeah.
Where are they going to go in Toronto? There's nowhere really that they could build with the way the real estate is and everything else. And then they were talking about, well, just put it in the same spot. And I said, well, then where are they going to play for a couple? Because these
And
things don't go
that's
up like houses.
no, like, and that's the problem with this is that truly the best location is right where it is. So
Yeah,
then what are you talking? You're talking about completely bulldozing it down and starting from scratch, which is what, at least 2 years, at least. More reasonably, probably 3 full years where you're playing. And I mean, especially after this team went through what they went through in 2020 and 2021 with constantly being on the road and constantly not playing in Toronto because of the rules to get into the country, right? So I don't think that it was very attractive to the players, and I think that this is why they wound up deciding on the reno over a new stadium. Although I think that in the next 10 years, that is still the goal of this ownership group. But we'll see.
well, it's going to be an interesting thing to see where they could possibly go and what they're going to do, because it's not like, I mean, Rogers has a few bucks in the bank, I'm assuming, so that real estate's not going to be a big deal for them to build something new and purchase some waterfront property or whatever it is. But I can't see the real estate price going down in the next 10 years or so. It's one of those things
No,
when you, like in Calgary there, when you guys got their hockey arena out to the event center, the sports center, like they've been humming and hawing about this for 10 years now. And okay, well, now it's just costing more and more and more, and taxpayer dollars and everything else. I can't see it going over very very well with the communities to say, oh, by the way, can you help pay for this?
yeah, no, that's
Yeah,
not really the way.
no, it doesn't work out that way. Once you get inside the dome there, like when you go, you said you like sitting in the right field seats. The food inside is great, and like you go to different ballparks, and maybe it's because we don't live in those communities or that you go to, and you don't see the branding. But when as soon as you walk into a Rogers Center, Sky Dome, whatever you want to call it, you see Schneider's Wieners banners everywhere. Is there something better to eat inside Sky Dome than just the run of the mill Schneider's hot dogs that I can get at Save On across the street?
They are working really hard at improving just that. I know that this has been a focal point of theirs, is just the selection of beer and food marketed to the fans. I mean, it's one of those things, and it could just be the old "you don't know what you got until it's gone" type of thing, right?
Yeah,
I always preferred going down to Detroit and seeing a game at Comerica, or going down to Milwaukee and watching a game there. I was never a huge fan of Rogers Center. I mean, I've been to Rogers Center probably pushing 100 times. It's my team's
yeah.
stadium, but the beer selection and the food selection has always been a beef. I've always been like, why is this is all there is, and it's super expensive. At least if it's going to be super expensive, give me all of the choices, right? Like,
Yeah,
if I'm gonna pay $15 for a hot dog, I want a wide selection of hot dogs to choose from.
yeah, just like I said, like you get a Molson or whatever it is, and then the King cans, I think they're $22 a piece,
Yeah,
and then like it's not cheap at all to go to a
no,
Jays game. It's
no,
really not. Like there's lots of places where you can go and find a beer here or there that's a little bit cheaper, but everything at Rogers seems to be high priced, and you got a Canadian dollar, and they pay in American and everything else. But Rogers, I think that they because they have the market cornered a little bit, they can do whatever they want here, and because people come from all over to watch them. Yeah, I feel the same way about like I love going to Yankee Stadium, but it's not the same as other ballparks. Like there's just something not that's missing a little bit at Yankee Stadium. It's just one of those things. Maybe that I've just been there a number of times. That it's kind of lost its luster a little bit. And you just kind of I want to go watch and play somewhere else for the
yeah.
next season. It's one of those things for sure. Uh, get on to how baseball is now. And I'm assuming you've watched a few games as the preseason's been going. Spring training's a week and a half going now. What's your thoughts so far on the new rules? Do you like them, dislike them? What's your thoughts?
I like them. I'm still giving them. Listen, what we're watching right now is not going to be the product we're watching in the regular
No.
season. I feel very strongly about that. I think that the umpires are cracking down harder than they will in the regular season, and for good reason, you want to give these guys a gauge of exactly how this is going to play out and work, right?
Yeah.
And giving a guy, even though there's been a few scenarios where guys have been called out to, like there was I think it was the first game of spring in Boston, or not in Boston, but with the Red Sox playing there, they had a guy end the game on a third strike called because of the pitch clock, right? We're not going to see that. And like everyone is giving these scenarios. Oh, well, what happens in game 7 of the World Series? And are you really fucking going to tell me that this is how the umpires are going to react? No, there's going to be some leeway. There's going to be playoff ball, just like they do with the officiating in hockey and basketball come the playoffs. There's going to be a little bit of leeway, but they need to set a hard line rule in spring training. They can't waver on it, or these rules are going to be ignored, right? If they don't enforce these rules, they're going to be ignored. So they got to set precedents here. And I think that's going on. I like the pitch clock more than I thought I would. The gamesmanship within it between the pitcher and the batter and how they're using the clock is definitely more interesting than I had originally given it credit for right off the bat when the rule was explained. The pickoff rule and the increased stolen base possibility is interesting to me. I don't honestly, man, I can't say if I really like it or not. I'm going to have to give it a little more time, but I'm fine with giving it time to see how this plays out. And I like to think, and I could be completely wrong here because normally Rob Manfred's a freaking clown, but I like to think if there are any real points to these rules that are just like, this is stupid, that it's amended in 2024. I mean, my goodness, dude, they literally mid-season cracked down hard on sticky stuff in 2021 and gave 0 runway. So, I mean, they could change the rules at any time. But personally, these rules, I don't know if you've seen how guys are reacting with the shift. They're still shifting. Yeah,
They're still shifting.
There's the rules with it. So it's not the extreme shift, but it's not the major change I think some of us were expecting. So I don't know. I'm still on the fence. I don't know how you feel, but I'm leaning towards I like it. Although I will be honest, dude, these spring training games are too short for my liking. I'm like, these aren't 3 hours. This isn't taking up my whole afternoon.
That's just it. That all of a sudden the chores I was supposed to do, I got to get done now. It's well, because the game's on. I got time to get things going here. But yeah, no, I like it to an extent, and there is some gamesmanship, and I totally agree with you that there will be a change for sure once especially once the playoffs come around. There's going to be relaxed. I think there has to be. You don't want to lose those moments that happen, and I can't see there ever being a situation where a run scores and the World Series is decided on it in the 9th inning. Like maybe they might change the rules and make the 7th inning on. We'll go back the old way or something along that way. But like there's going to be growing pains, and baseball is the only sport in 120 years, whatever it's been around, that hasn't changed really much. The game's been changed a lot, but the rules haven't changed a whole bunch on a year-to-year basis. And baseball is the only sport that's stuck to their guns. I mean, at one point there wasn't a 3-point line in basketball, right? So that's one of those things. So things did need to change to make the, I don't know if it's making the game better, but just to make the game thing a little bit different. And the thing that's crazy is that they're trying to get people to watch the game that weren't watching the game. So I don't know, like if they weren't watching before, they're not going to start watching now. And then you have the streaming problems and everything else that happens with baseball, that you have a lot of guys that just can't watch games. And I think that's a bigger problem that baseball has.
So a few things I want to add to what you just said. So I got a text from my buddy, and I will be honest, he's a casual baseball fan, but he likes baseball. He's not one of these, like, when baseball's on, he sits down, he'll drink a beer with me and watch it, and he's into the game. He knows the rules well enough that he can follow it. And when the Jays are on a run or something like that, he's right there with everybody else, right? I think those are the fans that MLB is trying to go from very casual to a little bit more invested. Yeah. So my buddy texted me the other day and he was like, you know what? I was quite surprised. I used to just put baseball on and then do my chores, but with this pitch clock, it's moving so fast, I find myself paying attention way more. So listen, this isn't everybody, and I'm cherry picking an example because it's in my life and it happened to me. So it's easy for me to be like, oh, it's working. that's the only story I've heard like that. And I've had people push back on our podcast when I've said that it's working. They're like, if you didn't like baseball before, you are not going to like it now. But I don't think they're trying to make the people who aren't ball fans fans. They're trying to make the peripheral folks who kind of enjoy baseball but find it too long pay attention a little bit more, and hoping that this extreme athleticism with all of these young studs that baseball's skewing so young and so athletic these days draws those casual fans in deeper. And now they're like you and I, where like that's the thing. The rule changes. Like, man, I'd watch baseball if it was a dog shit sport that lasted 5 hours. Like, slow it down. I'm still going to watch, but
Yeah.
they're not trying to get me on board, right?
And that's the thing that makes me laugh. Like the average baseball game was 322, which was, some people think it's long, but then football's so big across the United States and it's leaked into Canada, and every football game's 3 hours long. And I find football
Yeah.
death. I find that the most, and hopefully the people are listening to this one don't listen to the usual podcast, but because I find football so boring. Because when the games just get to the fourth quarter and their time, like I find football the dullest sport going, and that's just me talking. I don't get it. I think football is one of those sports that it's popular because it's popular, and that's just my opinion. People watch it because you're supposed to on Sundays, and that's just my opinion on that. But no, like a baseball game, I can watch forever and ever. It doesn't matter to me. One thing that we'll get off of this in a second here, but one problem that baseball is having right now that I find a little bit, and you said about the young studs that are playing, they don't market those guys enough. And then like even the World Baseball Classic is on. It was on last night I think the game was on at 8 o'clock last night after the Flames game. I turned the channel over and
Mm-hmm.
watch that a little bit. That's one thing. Like maybe it's just a Canadian thing or a Sportsnet thing or whoever, whatever. I don't think that they're marketing this nearly enough because it should be a bigger event than it is. I don't think that they're doing a good enough job, and especially maybe in our country, to market this as well as they should be.
I agree. I think it's a problem with the sport is they don't truly know how to market themselves. I mean, if you just look at Team USA's roster, like just take a look. Take a look at Dominican Republic's roster. Frick, go over the Netherlands roster. Like, man, this is an
My man
international
Dini's playing
game.
there. Yeah, I watched that last night. I
DD's
miss
there,
Dini.
yeah.
Yeah.
Bogarts is there. I mean,
Yeah.
like, man, this is an international game with international stars and big international stars. Very recognizable international stars like Shohei Ohtani. I know I'm cherry picking the top guy, but
Oh,
that said, right? And why this isn't being plastered everywhere, why they haven't managed to work out a TV deal where this is more at the forefront, I'm not sure. I know the timing of it doesn't line up great with spring training, which is a problem they've had with this tournament right from the on-go, right? Is where do they put it? You don't want to put it after the baseball season because guys are winding down and you risk
guys aren't going
injury
to play.
there.
Yeah.
Guys aren't going to play. You don't want to put it, I mean, it's not the Olympics, so you can't quite just be like, hey, let's take 3 weeks out of the season and everybody deal with this once every 3 years, which would be probably the best scenario for the tournament. But MLB will never get on board with that. So where we've watched hockey go out of their way to help grow the sport, sometimes baseball, the old heads get a little bit stubborn, right? And they're just like, the sport
100%.
is fine, everything's great. There's no reason we're still in their head, it's still 1971 and they're still the number one sport in all of North America. And that's, like that's not the case anymore. So
They're
I don't know.
probably a distant third and maybe almost a fourth behind college football even now, really, when it comes down to it. They're still, I'd still like to think that they're ahead of hockey and the like, but
Yeah.
I think they're definitely a distant third behind the
Yeah.
NBA, I think, and the NFL, which is a beast all of its own, and it's a different thing. You mentioned 2015, the wheelhouse with the Jays when they were going there, and that's one thing I like to. We'll get into that 2015-16 seasons when the Jays were licking the jar and they were right there. Man, for a baseball fan like myself, the Yankees weren't having the best of runs back then, but it was interesting to watch those 15, 16 teams because it brought people who normally don't, who are periphery people that watch baseball a little bit, right coast to coast in our country. It made baseball really relevant for about 2.5 months there, where people were talking Jays. They were packing bars and restaurants and the
Yeah.
like to watch games. And that happened start October, where it didn't seem like they were going to lose a game. And Thompson made those deals, and everybody's like, "Whoa, we're going for it." What was your thoughts on those two seasons that the Jays put together?
I mean, it was eye opening to, it was kind of a reminder, right? I mean, I'm old, so I was 10 and 11 when, and I know you're even older, but I was 10
Got
and
a few
11
on
when
me,
the
yeah.
I was 10 and 11 when the Blue Jays won the World Series in 92 and 93, and I remember how crazy Canada was
Yeah.
for baseball in the 90s. Like, man, this country loved the Toronto Blue Jays for about 5 years there, right? 1990 to 95, every kid was cheering for the Blue Jays. Everybody was watching the sport. It was the first time in Canadian history, because if you're a hockey fan, you're not cheering for the Canadian team, right? That's
Regional, and
insanity.
even like your regional team, maybe, and then you might even be a fan of the Philadelphia Flyers, whatever, right? Like
Yeah.
or the Bruins or whoever. But everybody was a Jays fan. Yeah,
Everybody was a Jays fan, and you could be a Jays fan and feel that Canadian pride. Whereas, like, I'm a Calgary Flames fan, and I could care less how far the Oilers go. I'm still cheering against them. I know that it's the Battle of Alberta is dead and has been long dead, but man, I remember the 90s, right? I remember the 80s. I'm not cheering for the Oilers, but there is none of that when it comes to the Toronto Blue Jays. So
yeah,
the love of baseball in this country always kind of boiled under the surface, but the Jays were so horrible for so long. And
yeah.
there was that 22-year streak without a playoff game. It killed the over the top love of it, right? Like, I think there were still a lot of fans who were like paying attention here and there. Maybe we're even hopeful in spring, which is the greatest thing about spring, right? Is us baseball fans all get to have a little bit of hope, right?
Yeah,
no matter how, no
March
matter
30th this year, we're all World Series champions in
that's
6
right,
months. Yeah,
exactly. No matter how bleak your team looks, March 31st, you're like, you know what? Who knows? They look good,
this is
right?
the year.
So yeah, 2015 was a really good reminder that there is a lot of love for baseball in Canada, and that this is one team, one nation, as they so love to say, and that there is a massive market in Canada for the Toronto Blue Jays when they're winning. And I think that Alex Anthopoulos going all in like he did, and things, let's face it, man, that team was 50 and 51 when they made the trade for David Price.
Yeah,
Like, that's an insane move. And it's because he was going to be fired. Like, he was on a short lease. That was kind of his kind of like, well, shit, I'm gone anyways. Let's put the chips in. And it worked out. It worked out big with the moves they made, bringing in Ben Revere to be that leadoff man and get those hits and get on base, or the best three guys at the heart of the Blue Jays order in history, I would argue, with Donaldson, Batista, and Encarnacion. And then they went out and they bolstered that rotation with David Price, who came in with just this energy and this fun vibe to him. Something that
yeah,
kind of was missing from that Blue Jays team was that fun feel, right? And he brought in and bought everyone scooters, and it's on every sports radio across Canada. And you know, the love of Blue Jays all of a sudden just reinvigorated. And honestly, man, if you're going to make the playoffs, doing it in the fashion Toronto did, right? Massive trades at the deadline, and then go from a 500 team to literally the division winner. You're a Yankees fan. I'm sure you remember that last
oh yeah,
6 weeks
yeah.
of the season. It was ridiculous.
They couldn't
The
lose.
Jays the Jays won one out, like they won two out of every three games for the rest of the season. Like they just won. It might have even been more than that. I think they were playing over 700 ball. Like, it was
Yeah,
insanity the way they got in that year. And then to go to the championship series after not having a sniff of playoffs. I mean, my God, man, the fans in Toronto were chanting Alex Anthopoulos. Like, when have you ever heard a fan base chant the general manager's name? Like, that's not a thing in sports, no matter how much you love your GM, right?
yeah.
Like,
Like
so
you look at what they did back then, Anthopoulos and everything else. And you see a lot of like, cause I follow the Yankees a lot, obviously. But I don't care who their prospects are. I could care less. And Anthopoulos didn't care at all. He said, "Yeah, get rid of." And I don't remember who the guys were that they got rid of and what they might have turned out to be. And you know what? And I don't think Jays fans should care either, because they were right there licking the jar to be a team that did some damage. And I say on this show all the time, prospects are cool, but championships are cooler. And if you get a chance to go out and grab one, go out and grab a chance. You don't get that many chances, because winning's hard. Winning is very hard. When you get a chance to do it, you go out and do it, because prospects are just prospects. They're just a kid playing in for Wichita State, maybe, right? And you don't know if he's going to have Tommy John or whatever's going to happen, especially in baseball, where these guys there's so many players and there's so many ways to build a team. And the Jays went for it. Like those, like the bat flip game, that's part of Canadiana now a little bit. Like
it's history.
What's your memories of that one?
I mean, the bat flip game stands out in my mind of sports memories in general. Like, it was insane. The whole city of Toronto was watching that game, man. And it didn't matter if you were a Blue Jays fan or not. You were watching that game. That's how big it was, right? And the fact that there was that rivalry with the Rangers already that had been brewing all season, right? Batista and Sam Dyson, just the fact that they're jawing before his bat flip home run, game-winning home run, like, it was just the whole thing. Just talking about it, man, gives me goosebumps. I would say it's outside of the Joe Carter home run. I mean, how do you top a walk-off? You can't top a walk-off World Series winning home run. But outside of that moment, I would say it's the most important moment in Blue Jays history.
Like the way that inning turned out, or the seventh inning there, I think it was, when the Martin threw the ball back to pitcher, went off the nub of the bat, and the umpire made the right call. Dale Scott, I'm an umpire hogger too, by the way. I'll tell you after the show about that. But the Dale Scott made the right call the whole bit, and nobody knew what was going on, and the people were throwing stuff onto the field. It was wild. Absolutely wild. Like, when people say that baseball's boring, they have no idea. We'll get off of that, because those are those easy ones to talk about. We can talk about that for 2 or 3 days, just that one inning. But a lot of guys go to games all the time. Like, you go to 20, 30 games a year. If you live in the city, you might go to 2 a year, or whatever it may be, or you might get to one in your lifetime. But everybody has a moment. If it could be a game in June on a Tuesday, that means absolutely nothing to anybody, but there's a time when you're at the field. What's your Blue Jay moment at the field that you saw live that might not mean anything, like the player might not remember it? What's one that sticks out in your mind?
So this probably is recency bias, but I had my bachelor party in September, and the boys and I all went down to Pittsburgh, and we caught the Blue Jays and Pirates series at the beginning of September. And the Saturday game, there was a moment where the Blue Jays fans were far louder than the Pirates fans, far louder. And then the PA announcer comes on the PA and starts going, "Let's go Pirates." And the Blue Jays fans just like got crazy loud. And like, it felt like we were overpowering the Pirates PA, and there was like this excitement amongst all the Blue Jays fans. And of course, unfair, right? Yes, there were probably the same amount of Blue Jays fans as Pirates fans there, but the Pirates were pretty much already eliminated by July. Forget about September.
The Pirates are eliminated right now for next season, not even this season. They're already out.
Yeah. Exactly. All the Blue Jays fans had come down from Southern Ontario, so they were there for the weekend. It was a party weekend, right? And all these Pirates fans come up to the Saturday afternoon game, and they're like, "What the hell is this?" Right? So that kind of stands out as a pretty cool moment in my baseball watching and going, life. So that probably ranks number one. But I've been to probably 100 games. Most of them are Rogers Center, but I love live baseball, man. There's a lot of people. I've got buddies who love baseball more than anything, and they'd prefer not to watch it live. And I'm just like, I don't know what you're talking about. I love it.
I'll go to whatever. Like, I'll watch any. Like, I will talk about that afterwards too. But like, because I actually umpire in the WCBL, so I get to watch a lot of those games live.
Okay.
So I'm actually get a real front row seat to those games, a little bit too closer than I really want to get sometimes. But I think it's the greatest game in the world. And like, me and the wife, we laugh about it a lot. How much more of a you can just sit there and watch a game and talk to the person next to you, because a lot of times there's not there's a lot happening, but there's no action. But it's a thinking person's game, and you can get scenarios in your head and have a BS with the person next to you, and you hear the crack of the bat, and then something happens, and everything's going on, and it's so great compared to hockey, or just guys skating around and football whistles and the like. But baseball is such a great game to watch. And like the Jays, you go to those games, and Canadian fans, they get a bit of a bad rap because you guys don't know anything about baseball. No, we do. Which is we don't get the ins and outs, everything else that happen around the games in general. I mean, you and I do, we're baseball dorks, and that's just kind of the thing is going.
Yeah.
Over the years, like I've been you watch Jays fans. It was the only game you could ever watch here in Canada on, unless you got the Saturday afternoon game of the week and the like, and then there was Sunday night baseball that came on a little later on. But back when there was only 3 channels, where I grew up in Fort McLeod, there was you watch the Jays and you remember some of those great players back then. You talked about the teams in the late '80s and the early '90s and the Whamco and I go back even further to Lloyd Mosby and those guys and that kind of stuff. And who's your favorite Blue Jay of all time?
My favorite Blue Jay of all time is John Olerud. I absolutely fell in love with him as a kid. I mean, when he was chasing 400 in '93, I think it was April 2nd, and his batting average was sitting at 401. And I mean, he went 0 for 4 that game, and I think it knocked it down to 399. And that was August 2nd was the last time that he was hitting 400. But who hits 400 into August? I mean, just such an accomplishment. And the fact he had to wear the hard helmet, because playing minor ball, they made you wear the hard helmet, right? I mean, you should be wearing. I'm not saying that's a bad thing. We should all be wearing helmets.
Yeah.
But I related to it to Johnny O, because he had to wear the hard helmet all the time, and like you're just a little kid, and you're just like, yeah, I got to wear my hard helmet too, so it was always Johnny O for me. And then I mean, I love R.A. Dickey. I mean, he's just behind me here. I just love the man's story and the fact that he was born without the ACL in his elbow, and they didn't find out about it till well after he was drafted, and how he had to reinvent himself as a knuckleball pitcher and winning a Cy Young as a knuckleball. Like, that'll never happen again, man. We'll never see a Cy Young knuckleballer. I mean, if we do, that's amazing, and I hope we do. But let's face it, that's a pretty rare. We might never see another good knuckleballer. Like,
no, because now everybody's all about velocity, right? Throw as hard as you can, and get Tommy John. Throw as hard as you can again. Get Tommy John again, and then finish out your career. Yeah, it's absolutely crazy the way the game's evolved like that. It's so nuts the way it's just everything's fast, go, and they're taught at such a young age. I had a guy from the place of Winnipeg Goldeyes on our show a while ago, and he went through his Tommy John when he was in college in San Francisco, and he was like, "It's just what it is." He said, like, it's just accepted now. And he had teammates and his college coaches that they went through it already. So they were like, "No, don't worry about it, man. It's just part of it." Like, it's so bizarre how it used to be like, even if you got Tommy John, you never meant you would throw again. Now these guys are pitching 10 months later.
Well, I read the book The Arm by Jeff Pass, an MLB analyst, and he talks about the epidemic that is Tommy John surgery. And it was a really interesting book because he followed a couple of guys who had Tommy John surgery around, and kind of just the struggle that it was and what a long recovery it is. And this is one thing folks don't even get about Tommy John surgery, and just what a crazy injury it is to need to go through as an athlete, right? Because you're away from the game for 12 to 18 months. Like, that's just how long it takes.
Yeah.
Where you're not with your team, you're rehabbing on yourself. Like, even it was really surprising reading this book, and just the mental battle behind it is crazy. And then what was even wilder is he went to Japan and did a bunch of research of what's going on in Japan. Same thing, same epidemic. They don't talk about it in Japan like it's brought up here. Like in North American baseball, it's like, oh yeah, Tommy John, no big deal, right? So it's a little bit more of a shame thing, and they hide it a little bit more. But like, there's guys getting Tommy John surgery at 13 years old, man. That's freaking insane.
Yeah, it's almost like get it done early, and that your career will be this much longer in the hopes you even get a career. Like it's minor sports is different now than it was. Obviously, with that's a whole nother show for another day if you were wanting to get into
Yeah.
that one, because it's just different how these get Tommy John, get your elbow straightened out, or just get whatever put in there, make you bionic, and you're good to go. It's absolute insanity the way that it all works out. Let's get into this year's team. You got the Jays got one hell of a lineup there. They were projected to win a World Series last year. A lot of the experts we're picking them to go all the way in 2022. We talked about at the beginning of the show how that didn't all work out in the opening round of the playoffs last year. This team is good. This Jays team, in fact, you know what? They're not just good. I think they're great. I think they got a legitimate shot. Whether they can knock off the defending world champion Houston Astros, I've forgiven the Astros, but I'll never forget. I've forgiven. I have peace in my heart when it comes to all that. But what's your thoughts on this Jays team, and who's your maybe a dark horse guy is going to come out of the woodworks and maybe push them over the hump a little bit?
I really like this team. I really like what the front office did over the off season. They had some real warts that were showing at the end of last season, and I think that they went out of their way to address it. Number one being the lack of competent lefty bats within this lineup, something to break up all the righties at the top of this lineup, and going out and getting Dalton Varsho and signing Brandon Belt, I think were two excellent moves. Varsho, especially with the fact that they had a need in the outfield. They needed a lefty bat, and they were managed to go out and get a guy with 4 years of term still to his name. I mean, that's fantastic. And yes, they gave up one of the number one prospects in all of baseball, and Gabriel Moreno. You got to give to get, right? And I think that the Jays were deep enough at catcher that this is not going to be something that affects them in the long run. I think Danny Jansen is going to be continue to progress. I think if he can stay healthy, he's going to turn a lot of heads around baseball this year. And Alejandro Kirk, I truly believe people talk about his body maybe not holding up, but he's 23. Even if his body doesn't hold up, it's going to hold up till he's 27. Like,
He's fine.
like let's
The
be
Tijuana
serious,
Titans
right?
going to be fine. There's no getting
Yeah,
around that.
he'll
Yeah.
be fine. So, anyways, what I'm saying is that it's a much more balanced lineup. I really like how they went out and got Chris Bassett, right? Signed him
Good arm.
3 years. And what I like about Bassett is he's a wily old dude, man. Like he's 34 years old. He's been around the league. He knows what to do when you're needing outs, right? Like he eats innings. This is something that this rotation has
Yeah.
lacked for a long time, was a guy who can go out there and you can pen in, 180 innings gonna happen. Right? So if you've got Bassett who eats 180, Jose Barrios, who, I mean, a bounce back would be nice, but he's still going to pitch, right? Like he's still going to eat innings. And then you've got Alek Manoah. So you're pushing 600 innings with three guys. That's not something that happens in baseball very often anymore.
Yeah.
And that's only going to benefit their bullpen, which is the deepest it's been in years. I love some of the depth pieces they've got within their system, because this was one of the Achilles heels of the Blue Jays last year, was that their minor league system, if there was a problem or an injury in the bullpen and they go down into AAA, all their top guys were in high A, right? So there was like this gap in the system where there wasn't really a viable option to bring a guy up and hope it works out. You're more bringing up guys like Casey Lawrence, 34-year-old veteran who's kicked around the league for 12 years and is now in AAA as a depth piece, right? So that's the Jays have done a lot to improve depth. And yeah, man, I think that they are going to challenge the Yankees for the division. If I'm a betting man, I'm putting my money on the Yankees to come out on top of that one. But I think the Jays are going to scare Yankees fans most of the season. And I think that they'll finish as the number one wild card.
I got the Jays finish ahead of the Yankees for a simple reason. I think that the Yankees are they were kind of a one trick pony, and once that pony kind of slowed down a little bit in the second half, not a whole bunch, but Judge slowed down in the second half a little. He couldn't keep that pace up to hit 120 home runs, whatever he was on pace for at one point there, and then the team really struggled in the second half of the season last year, and I just can't see them picking that up, and I think that Nestor Cortez is going to take a step back. That came out of nowhere last year, in my opinion, and I like this Jays team, and I really think with Bichette and Guerrero as their two young studs, obviously they aren't getting younger, but they're still young. They need to go for it because who knows how long you're going to have these guys, and the money that they're going to command in 2 to 3 years, you just don't know. See, I think the Jays better go for it this year.
I agree, and I'm pretty excited to watch this ownership group spend the money they're spending. Rogers has always kind of been shit on, if you will, for not spending the money, but I mean, they're the fifth highest spending team in baseball right now. They're over the luxury tax. I never thought that they would spend like this, and it's pretty encouraging to see. Pretty encouraging to see.
Just have to check my phone bill at the end of the season. See how much
You're
Rogers
like,
put
where
up
are they
on
getting
that.
this money back from? Yeah.
Like, what the heck happened here? Why is this all of a sudden? Why did the rate I have all of a sudden kind of change for some reason? No, I think they're an exciting team. They'd be fun to watch. Picking up Brandon Belt, 2-time World Series champion, that can't hurt either. Like that can do nothing but help your team. He'll be a spot guy, DH mainly here and there.
Yep.
He's doesn't gonna have a big role, but having that winning pedigree in there to say, here guys, this is what we did. Here's how you win a little bit. Because I think that those guys, at whatever sport you have, having a guy to come into your dressing room and say, this is what you need to do, that can't hurt.
And after collapsing it to Seattle like they did, man, you remember that, right? You might not know what it takes to win, but you know damn well what it takes to not feel like that again, right? And I think that's big. Yeah.
No, that's huge. It's it's going to be tough to unseat the World Series champion. I think I don't think that the Astros are going anywhere anytime soon. They're so good, and just the way that they just kind of wiped up with everything last year. And it's say what you want about the Astros. I mean, they've been into how many World Series in the last how many years, right? And you got to think that they're going to be back there again. It's going to take a piece here and there for the Jays or for the Yankees to unseat them. But I think both teams, and it's too bad that it's not the divisions are screwed up and they're having I don't know how much. Do you like that at all? Like how they're a balanced schedule per se? How much do you like that?
I like it because I'm a Blue Jays fan. Who wants more games in the AL East? But I mean, is going to I honestly we're gonna need to give it a season and see how it feels is kind of how I feel about this one. I do like the fact that I'm going to get to see National League teams that I wouldn't normally get to see. So, sometimes you need to wait 3 or 4 years to see the likes of Manny Machado play your team, right? One of the best freaking ball players in MLB right now, and you don't even get to see him once a year. So I think that that's a good thing for the marketing of the sport. How do you feel about it, man? Like, do you dislike it?
I like it to the fact that I as well. I didn't like seeing the Red Sox 19 times and the Jays 19 times and Tampa 19 times. That was a bit much. I thought there was a way they could have changed a little bit. I kind of miss the old days that when there was without interleague. Like I kind of miss that more than anything because it was just one of those things. But since they went to the interleague play, I like but having play a few more teams that you wouldn't see. I do like that. Like you said, with San Diego, some of the best young talent in baseball, and you never see them. Like unless you have the MLB package, it's some of the best players in baseball, and you'll never see them. And that's one thing baseball has to straighten out. Like we talked to earlier on, like it's baseball. Like I don't think baseball has a baseball problem. I've talked about this the 10th or 11th one of these things I've done, and to a man, pretty much. Everybody has kind of said baseball doesn't have a baseball problem. Baseball has a marketing problem. And that's the biggest thing that baseball has. They just get in their own way, and like you said earlier on, they just they're old man get off my lawn kind of guy, and this is how we do things. This is how and now that Manfred's changed things, now we have the old men saying, well, don't change things. Well, we can't have it both ways.
Tradition slows us down because, and I'm guilty of this, dude. I'm so guilty of this. As soon as something new happens, I'm like, no, don't do it, right? You just touched on it though, right? I missed the National League, American League, but how long has that not been a thing? There's not even a DH
that's got to be.
Pitchers don't even hit anymore. So who gives a shit about an unbalanced schedule then? It should all be balanced. It doesn't even matter.
Yeah.
Right? Like your pitcher, there's no rule differences anymore. There's nothing. So what are we clinging to?
So why even have an American League, National League? Really?
Don't even. This is what I'm saying. Yeah. Redo everything. Like shit. At this point, let's make it so that the travel schedule is better. Like,
top 16 teams get in and go, and that's it. One through 30, and then see you later, right? And
Yeah.
maybe that it's going to come to that. It won't be long before it comes to that, and that's because you could
Well,
go
they're
the
already
seasonal.
talking expansion. As soon as there's expansion, I think that's when they'll do it all, right?
We'll get you out of here in a second because I've taken up more of your time than I asked for. But it's crazy that you have that, and because the season starts in about 3 weeks from now. There's 15 teams right now that aren't making the playoffs.
Yeah.
You just know, you just know it, and it's so. What are we doing? What are we
Hmm.
doing with the way it all goes? And yeah, it's crazy. Baseball has a baseball marketing problem, not a baseball problem. We'll Scott, we'll do some extra innings. We'll get you out of here. How's that sound?
I love it, buddy.
Is a hot dog a sandwich?
Yeah.
If you catch a ball at a game, do you give it to a kid?
I'm not looking for a kid, but if there's a kid right in front of me, I guess I'd do the right thing.
That thing that happened at Rogers Center last year with the Judge home run, gave it to the kid. The Jays took. Sorry about this. This is a whole other story. But the Jays gave those, or the Yankees, or somebody gave those two families tickets, and we were there in Toronto in August last year, or in New York, and that family were on the subway with them, and they told us the whole story. Blah blah
Oh,
blah. And
cool.
yeah, it was one of those romantic about baseball things. It was after the game,
Yeah.
and I had a couple of beers in me, so blah blah blah, talking the whole time. But no, it was a
Honestly,
really
that was such a cool moment to watch
yeah.
him give it to that kid and just how excited the kid was. I'll be honest, I would have thrown that ball right back on the field. I
That's funny. No, that's
but good for
yeah.
him.
That was a
Yeah.
great moment. Yeah, we met those two families on the subway, and they said, "Well, you from here?" I said, "No, we're from Alberta." And well, where do we get off? I
Yeah.
said, "Just follow me. Just follow the people in the jerseys. That's how you get off the subway.
Yeah.
It's fine. It's no big deal. Just follow the jerseys. It's easy." Uh, how old is too old to take your glove to a baseball game?
I would say you're never too old.
That's the right answer. Two more to go. Do you like Josh Donaldson, the president of the Josh Donaldson fan club?
I like the bringer of rain. Yeah. I mean, honestly, seeing him in pinstripes killed me, and this is my
If
own
you guys
bias,
want
my
him back,
friend.
you can have him.
Oh, I know, I know. I'm fine with him being there right now. I
Oh,
absolutely am fine with him being there. But if you're asking 2015 Scott what he thinks about Josh Donaldson, well, I
yeah.
will tell you it's a much more emphatic. He's the greatest ever. So
No, he was a hell of a player, and he had something going on there. Now it's just the game. I think the game's passed him by a little bit. He can't keep up with the fastball, and I don't know where they're going to play him this year down in New York, down in the Bronx. Because it
it's
just doesn't.
almost like this happens to a lot of 37-year-olds. It's weird.
Weird, hey, how that works. So, what, you want a long term contract? Yeah, but we know you're going to be. I thought they'd
Yeah.
front end load Judge's contract a lot more and pay him less at the back end, because it happens every time, no matter what sport, no matter
Well,
what sport.
When Trey Turner's wearing pinstripes in 5 years, that's what you could really look forward to.
Oh, I can't wait. I'll be 55 years old, swearing to my TV still.
So will
Just, just,
Turner. No,
just mad. Yes, he'll be the same age. Yeah. And last one, we'll talk about your show for a little bit. Should Pete Rose be in the Hall of Fame?
yeah. I mean, honestly, man, the Hall of Fame is definitely not a group of the greatest people. So, I mean, there's pieces of shit already in there. What are we doing? It should be. I don't know. I've always viewed the Hall of Fame like it's the greatest of all time, a museum for them, right? So
Yeah.
like, I don't think there's anything wrong with putting like guys who the steroid era should be in there. It should be called the steroid era, and it should be reported and documented as such. But I mean, to just pick and choose which parts of baseball fit into the Hall of Fame, I've just never really got that.
The Hall of Fame has lost its luster in the last how many X amount of years, because when you get these writers who, like this year, they only put in Scott Rowland, who I think
Yeah,
is the Hall. I think he's the Hall of pretty good. Personally, that's my take on Roland. He had a really good career. I wouldn't say he's a Hall of Famer because he's okay just because you don't like a steroid guy. There, and then how guys get better over time, I don't understand that either. I've never got that. If you don't go in your first year, how do you get better when you haven't played 10 years more? Like that's one
Mhm.
thing I've never understood about the Hall of Fame and how that always works out. But yeah, the steroid guys should be in. If anybody says that Barry Bonds shouldn't be a Hall of Famer, they're out of their
This is
minds.
this is my feeling on Pete Rose. It's like, well, Barry Bonds isn't in, so who cares? Like, it's the
Yeah.
like, I mean, don't get me wrong, Cooperstown is awesome, and I plan on going at some point, and I do still revere the Hall of Fame.
Yeah.
I still when like I go out of my way to see who they've uh nominated. I follow it far more than most people would follow the Hall of Fame. But at the same time, I don't know what to say. I don't hold it on a pedestal anymore. I'll tell you that.
We'll get you out here in half a second here, but that's a funny thing. Like, and obviously, I'm a Yankee hugger, but like for a person to have a vote that didn't vote for Derek Sanderson Jeter, they should lose their ballot. Like, at what point is Derek Jeter not a Hall of Famer to that guy?
Yeah.
Like I don't understand it. Anyways, you guys' podcast, I saw your guys' range. You guys are off to a flaming start, man. 2.5 years into it, COVID, the whole bit. That's when you guys started like we did. Tell us about
Yeah.
your show. Tell us how it's going, how you came up with it all, and what's happening with your guys' show, where we can find you.
So the walk off, we are a Blue Jays centric show. We delve into the MLB from time to time as well, obviously. We started in July of 2020. Adam Mack and I are both comics. So we were on the road together touring and we were talking baseball. And this was literally when the world shut down, March 2020. And we kind of were
Right
like, okay,
around
well,
this
we'll get
time, yeah.
right around this time. We're like, okay, well, we'll get back on the road in a couple weeks. Right. Uh, yeah. So, anyways, months go by of not being able to work, not being able to do anything, and Adam, my co-host, called me up and was like, "Hey, if I did all of the tech end of stuff, would you do this baseball podcast with me?" And we figured that we might as well kill some time. It's like you said, right? Our wives were pulling their hairs out just trying to get us to do anything that wasn't annoying to them. So, uh,
You're breathing. Yeah, I know.
oh man, boy, do I breathe annoyingly. Let me tell you. Yeah, so we went from there, and honestly, man, we hit #1 on the Apple charts for baseball podcasts in Canada in February. So from zero to hero. So
Yeah,
you
I saw
can.
that. Yeah, I've been listening to your guys' show for a while now because like any baseball content I can get Canadian guys, I listen to a lot. And it's no, I reached out to you guys and you were more than happy to come on the show and give us a hand through this little journey we're on. This thing was a
Yeah,
great
this is
conversation.
awesome.
I really appreciate it, and we'll have to hook up halfway through the season, see how both our teams are doing, and see how it's going because it's going to be. I think
I
it's going to be a great season for both of our teams.
I love that idea, my man. I look forward to it. And
No,
yeah, thanks so much for having me on. I really appreciate it.
yeah, no, it was a lot of fun. We'll do it again sometime soon.
Cheers.